This is the start of part 3 of the 1951 F1 truck rebuild series. And what we're doing in this particular video is making use of POR15 on this frame. If you'll notice, frame down here, of course, is rusty and flaky, and I've not yet hit it with the wire wheel. Down on this end, this section's been all been wire wheeled. It's a new front suspension cross member and spring supports for airbag supports, and the shock mounts are installed, and the rest of the metal has all been wire wheeled to get the excess rust off. And now we have sprayed it with the cleaner degreaser from POR15, and we're letting that soak for just a few minutes before we rinse it off with water. We actually did the opposite side. We flipped the frame. We did the opposite side already down to the metal prep, so we're doing this side down to the metal prep, and then we'll start POR15 in this thing hopefully tomorrow once it's fully dried out. So once all the loose metal flake is off, rust flake is off, then it's just a matter of spraying on this cleaner. This cleaner is cut 5-to-1 in a spray bottle, if you can see it right down there. And so it's cut 5-to-1 in a spray bottle. And since we're doing both sides, the other side's kind of did some of these surfaces unintentionally while it was flipped upside down. So it won't take but a minute to finish this cleanup. And then once the cleanup's done, we'll start with the metal prep. So I'll get back with you then. Alright, so now that we've got it washed with the degreaser, cleaner degreaser, now it's time to cover it with the metal prep. Metal prep's this pretty blue color, no indication of dilution required. So basically we just use this sprayer and just cover the metal, wet the metal with the metal prep. The metal prep has, I can't remember now, some metal ions in it that react with, or supposed to react with the rust to stabilize the rust chemically before you use the before you coat it with POR15. Like I said, we already did one side, so places like that have already been done from the other side. So really mostly this top rail on top of these spring caps and things are what's left to do. So what we want to do here is we want to wet it, and then we want to keep it wet. They'll start to dry off, look kind of give it a white chalky look like you might see there, and that's just that metal reaction taking place. We weren't able to do the top of this cross member, so we're doing it. So yeah, we'll continue this for about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. We'll let it start to dry off, and then as it does and gets chalky, we'll come back and hit it again and keep that up for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll rinse it again with water. So I'll get back with you. So we've been metal prepping for about 20 minutes. You can see everything's still nice and wet, and keeping it wet. What you'll start to see is this white powdery looking finish. It's basically I think it's zinc that's reacting with the metal and stabilizing the rust. So we're looking good. You may have noticed in a prior video I didn't have my gloves on. That was an oversight on my part. Use gloves. Also have both garage doors open. There's a fan back there in the corner blowing to keep the mist down. And so now we're going to drag the water hose back in here, and we're going to rinse off the metal prep. Alright, so the metal prep is complete. So it's been cleaned, rinsed, metal prepped, 30 minutes or so, rinsed, and now it's about ready to paint. We've got to wait for it to dry completely before we try to put the POR15 covering on it. You'll notice these white smears and areas, and this is where the metal prep's reacting with the metal, and this is going to give us a stable coat, or stable base, to cover it with POR15. And so take your time, do your metal prep, follow the directions, which is all I'm doing, and then let it dry. So we'll get back with you when we start painting this thing. Alright, so it's time to put on the POR15. You'll see the can down there, the brush. You'll see a mess on the floor. Need to do this differently. I'm going to put some paper down here in a few minutes, tape it to the floor. Silly me for not doing it to start with. But basically, it paints like paint. Stir the can, don't shake it preferably. Just get a lot of air entrainment if you do. And as you get going, you want to do a minimum of 2 coats, and you don't want to goop it on too heavily to start with. There are some places where it tends to get gooped on, around cracks and bolt heads and things like that. But yeah, try to thin it out to where it's a reasonable coverage, but you don't have to cover it all in the first pass necessarily. Just don't let it get too thick. So we've done pretty much everything from the top side. I'm going to get my roll around here and do some work on the bottom side. And hopefully we'll get this thing pretty well finished up this evening. Again, with 2 coats, you need to wait an hour or 2 between coats. But if you wait too long, then you're going to end up having to scuff it in order to get good adhesion to the second coat. So we don't want to do that. We want to go ahead and get it done. And by the time I get through with the first coat, take a little break, and I'll probably be able to get right back to the second coat if I start at the same point I started before. So there you go, POR15. I hope it's a great product. I expect it to be a great product. One thing I wasn't able to do very well is get up in these areas here where the frame is boxed now. So I'm probably going to get some there's some box frame coverage material that you can, it's got a little hose on it that you feed up in there and spray. So I'll probably do that just to cover those boxed in areas. They were primed with weld through primer, but I'd like to see it see something a little more in there. Anyway, POR15, 1/3 of the frame will be done shortly. We're going to do the back third of the frame when we put in the rear suspension, and then we'll do the center section on the frame after the engine's installed, the transmission mounts fabbed up, and all those goodies. Also, while I was flipping the frame to do some of this work, I discovered that the rust through some of these brace here is pretty ridiculous. On this side, one of these sides, it's all but detached. I think it's over here on this side, it's pretty much detached. So we're going to end up refabbing that cross member. I've got some 11 gauge steel that'll probably work well enough, and I'll just have to be sure and draw it out, because this hole is it's a mount point for the bed. I want to keep it in the right place, and so we'll probably end up drawing this thing up and building something for it. Anyway, well, we'll close for now. POR15 on the frame. Moving on. Take care. Bye. We'll finish up this part 3 video about POR15. A couple lessons learned. First one is brush choice. Somebody mentioned on one video I saw, use the sponge type disposable. Wouldn't recommend it. I'd use something inexpensive, true enough, but I'd use a bristle type brush, or I'd be cautious which sponge type you get. I can tell you that I started with a sponge type, and the adhesive apparently that stuck the sponge to the handle didn't hold up under POR15, so I had to throw that away, and I ended up going back to that was, I think, 1.5 inches bristle type brush. One thing about POR15, it seems to smooth pretty well, so put it on and let it settle. It seems to get rid of most of the brush marks, so not worried about it being a bristle type brush. Let's see what else. The solvent for cleanup, acetone. If it's not dry, acetone will do a good job, or if it's not real dry. I've got a little bit on me here or there. Acetone took it off. Careful with acetone on the body, obviously, and certainly wash off the acetone just as soon as you can. So that's it. I didn't bother you with a bunch of footage of me painting, because that's a waste of your time. But I think we're in a good place. It's supposed to finish with a semi-gloss finish. It's still drying, so I can't say everything for sure, but Yeah, it's doing what it's supposed to. These little odd things I haven't quite figured out yet. There's a little bit of, ooh, it's still tacky. A little bit of odd markings, maybe drips, drops, I don't know. Hopefully they'll kind of smooth out in texture, but I'm not sweating it too bad. This is not the outside of the truck. The first coat was a nice light coat, as they suggested. Second coat, also a light coat, but I did leave a bit more on the second coat. So hopefully we get good protection with 2 coats. You can see where I stopped painting this cross member. Ultimately has to go away. So while I did use the metal stabilizer on it, or the metal prep, it's not staying, so I didn't bother painting it. Anyway, POR15 went on well. Goes on everything and anything it gets near, so please be careful. I put down some paper here to minimize the mess, not to prevent it. Certainly have a mess, but hopefully that mess is reasonably contained. So, yep, moving on to the next bit.